power has the ability to reshape nations, redefine morality, and rewrite the course of history. When placed in the hands of individuals driven by ideology rather than humanity, it can destroy entire civilizations. Few figures represent this truth more starkly than Pol Pot, the man responsible for one of the most devastating genocides of the 20th century. This is the story of how a quiet student became the architect of mass death, and how an entire nation paid the price.
Early life and ideological roots. Pol Pot was born Saloth Sar in 1925 in the rural province of Kampong Thom, Cambodia. His family was relatively prosperous compared to many Cambodians of the time, and he received an education that placed him above the average rural population. As a young man, he was sent to France to study. It was there that he encountered Marxist ideology, which was gaining popularity among intellectual circles in post-war Europe. He joined leftist student groups and became deeply influenced by revolutionary communist ideas, particularly the belief that society could be rebuilt through absolute equality and the elimination of class distinctions. Unlike many Marxists, however, Pol Pot rejected industrialization and urbanization. He believed cities corrupted people and that true purity existed only in rural agricultural life. This belief would later become central to his ideology and the justification for mass displacement and murder.
The road to power. Returning to Cambodia, Pol Pot joined the underground communist movement, which later became known as the Khmer Rouge. The country at the time was politically unstable, suffering from corruption, economic inequality, and the spillover effects of the Vietnam War. As U.S. bombing campaigns destabilized rural Cambodia, resentment toward the government grew. The Khmer Rouge exploited this unrest, promising equality, justice, and independence from foreign influence. By 1975, after years of civil war, the Khmer Rouge seized control of Phnom Penh. The population initially celebrated, believing peace had arrived. They were tragically mistaken. Year Zero, erasing a nation. Almost immediately after taking power, Pol Pot announced the beginning of Year Zero. The idea was simple and terrifying. Cambodia's past would be erased completely. Cities were evacuated within hours, hospitals were emptied, families were forced to march into the countryside with no food, water, or supplies. Money was abolished, religion was banned, schools were closed, private property ceased to exist. The entire population was reorganized into labor camps where people worked up to 18 hours a day under brutal conditions. Anyone associated with education, religion, or foreign influence was labeled an enemy. Teachers, doctors, monks, and even people who wore glasses were targeted as intellectuals and executed.
The system of terror. Under Pol Pot's rule, fear became the primary tool of governance. The Khmer Rouge established a network of prisons and interrogation centers. The most infamous was Tuol Sleng, known as S21. Thousands were imprisoned there, tortured, and forced to confess imaginary crimes before being executed. Children were taken from their parents and indoctrinated to spy on them. Families were deliberately broken to eliminate loyalty other than to the regime. Starvation was widespread. Medical care was non-existent. Entire villages disappeared. By the late 1970s, an estimated 1.7 to 2 million people, nearly a quarter of Cambodia's population, had died from execution, starvation, disease, and forced labor. The collapse of the regime. Despite its brutality, the Khmer Rouge regime was unstable. Internal purges weakened leadership, and conflicts with neighboring Vietnam escalated. In 1979, Vietnamese forces invaded Cambodia, swiftly overthrowing the Khmer Rouge government. Pol Pot fled into the jungle near the Thai border, where he continued to lead remnants of his movement for years. Despite being responsible for one of the worst genocides in history, Pol Pot was never brought before an international court. He lived his final years in isolation and died in 1998. Justice for millions of victims never fully arrived.
The legacy of Pol Pot. The impact of Pol Pot's regime continues to shape Cambodia today. Entire generations were lost. Families were shattered. Cultural and intellectual life was nearly erased. Even decades later, mass graves, known as the killing fields, remain scattered across the country. Silent witnesses to unimaginable cruelty.
In the heart of the jungle,
The trauma left behind is not only physical, but psychological. Survivors live with memories of loss, fear, and silence. The nation continues its long process of healing. A warning for the future. The story of Pol Pot is not just a chapter in history books. It is a warning. It shows how ideology, when taken to extremes, can dehumanize entire populations. How fear can be weaponized. How obedience can replace morality. It reminds us that tyranny does not always arrive with chaos. It often begins with promises of order and purity. Remembering this history is not about blame. It is about vigilance. Because when societies stop questioning power, when they surrender their humanity in the name of ideology, the consequences can be catastrophic. And history, if ignored, has a way of repeating itself.